Hello, everyone. I'm Bob Sokolowski. I'm the Superintendent of Schools, and I want to welcome our parents to a presentation on our Keystone requirements for graduation. Our students, as parents are aware, they take the Keystone exams in Algebra 1, in biology, as well as literature. But back in 2018, the state passed what they call Act 158, and this provides a number of different pathways for students in lieu of proficiency on the Keystone exams to successfully meet the state graduation requirement. And with me as part of the presentation today is our Director of Equity and Assessment, Mrs. Dawn Matter, and she will review all of the details for the alternate pathways for families, as well as at the end of the presentation, provide contact information for parents to ask questions pertaining to their particular student. Before I turn the presentation over to Mrs. Matter, I would like to walk back in time with parents to explain, where did the Keystone graduation requirement come from? When did this come about? And this actually all came about 10 years ago. In 2012, the state announced that they would be moving from the required PSSA exams for juniors to simply take, so that school districts, schools would have data to see how students had progressed from their 8th grade year to entering their senior year. So that was a measurement simply at that time. And in 2013, they began administering the Keystone exams to students in Algebra 1, in literature, as well as biology. And it was the intention that in 2013, when they were first administered, that these would be graduation requirements for the students of 2017 and beyond. However, it did not turn out to be the case because in the fall of 2016, the Pennsylvania Department of Education had been informed that the United States Department of Education was going to evolve No Child Left Behind into the Every Student Succeeds Act. So therefore, Pennsylvania Department of Education put a pause on the graduation requirement for the Keystone exams. And in 2018, after the state had had a period of time to evaluate all of the information in the Every Student Succeeds Act that we now know as ESSA, they then provided a list of and scenarios for an alternate pathway for a student to graduate in lieu of passing one of the Keystone exams. So this was now pushed back to the class of 2021. And then we know there was a period in 2020 when we simply did not offer, because of the pandemic, the Keystone exams. So therefore, we're here now. And this Keystone exam requirement, the alternate pathway, does apply for the students who are currently our juniors and in the class of 2023. So we wanted to make sure that as we enter the Keystone exam testing window, that we're providing parents with a very thorough explanation of all of the different pathways, as well as how did we get here. So at this time, I would like to turn the presentation over to our Director of Equity and Assessment, Mrs. Dawn Matter.
Thank you, Dr. Sokolowski. Once again, my name is Dawn Matter, and I am the Director of Equity and Assessment here for the district. And as Dr. Sokolowski mentioned, I'm going to continue on with this informational session regarding the pathways to proficiency and other provisions. I'm also going to provide some graphics for you all just to try to break down this very confusing, complicated, but also necessary way or means that's required by the state of Pennsylvania for students to graduate. And I'm also going to provide just a few frequently asked questions or scenarios that can maybe help to understand some of the frequently asked questions that we get regarding Act 158. So I know Dr. Sokolowski did give a history of Act 158, and it's an extensive one, but just to move forward in where we are now is that in October of 2018, Governor Wolf he actually signed into law alternatives to Pennsylvania's statewide requirement of attaining proficiency on the 3 end-of-year courses regarding the Keystone exams. So we have the Algebra 1 literature as well as the biology. For a student to achieve statewide graduation requirements. So in the past, it was you had to receive proficiency in order to get your high school diploma. So due to Governor Wolf's alternatives, there are alternate ways for students who do not receive that proficiency. Also keep in mind that this is effective with the graduating class of 2023. So students have the option to demonstrate proficiency preparedness through one of 4 additional pathways that more fully illustrate college, career, and community readiness. Keystone exams will continue as the statewide assessment Pennsylvania uses to comply with the accountability requirements set forth in the federal Every Student Succeed Act, or ESA. So all those students will no longer be required to achieve proficiency on the Keystone exams to meet the statewide graduation requirement. Note that students must take the Keystone exams for federal accountability purposes. More on Act 158. Please note that, again, it expands options for students to demonstrate readiness for post-secondary success beyond solely proficiency on all 3 Keystone exams. And then the timeline, as I mentioned, that it was enacted in 2018, but the timeline was extended through the class of 2022-2023. So in layman's terms, that this will definitely take effect for any current juniors who will be considered the class of 2023. Some other questions that came up with parents regarding, well, extenuating circumstances. My student has an IEP, which is an individualized education plan. And what does this mean for my student? So I'm going to go over the law in regards to special populations and also waivers, which may or may not impact students without an IEP. Any student with a disability who satisfactorily completes a special education program developed by, as I mentioned, the IEP or an individualized education program team under the IDEA or the Individuals with Disability Education Act and 22 PA Code Chapter 14 relating to special education services and program that does not otherwise meet the requirements of Act 158 or Act 6 shall be granted and issued a regular high school diploma by the student's LEA. Doesn't meet the requirements of Act 158, which I'm going to go over in detail, or Act 6. Act 6 is for students who attend like a TCHS program, the technical program, which I'm going to also unpack later. Because if students who go to TCHS, there's also a pathway for those students to graduate. So if the student with an IEP does not meet either one, they are able to receive a regular high school diploma via their IEP goals. Just note that students who graduate in this manner are not considered to have been granted waivers. And I'm going to explain the waivers under Act 158. For more specific questions regarding your student's individual need, definitely follow up with the IEP team for specific questions. And then I'm going to talk in the next slide regarding waivers for students with extenuating circumstances. And as of today, the state is allowing the school districts to waive students from the Keystone requirement at 5%. So I'm going to explain further what this all means. So this is under Section 121 of the Public School Code. Just to help you understand, under Act 58, what the extenuating circumstances include. So a serious illness, a death in the student's immediate family, family emergency, frequent school transfers or transfers from an out-of-state school in 12th grade, or the COVID-19 pandemic. Keep in mind that this only applies to students graduating in the class of 2023. So there's a plethora of unfortunate situations that have happened to students. And so the state does consider this as far as the need for a waiver. So under all of these different circumstances, if your child does not meet the alternate or the evidence-based pathway or a traditional pathway for whatever reason it is, or if your student doesn't have an IEP or even attend TCHS, there are circumstances that our superintendent here is able to waive once that time comes, which is at the conclusion of the reporting year. Okay, so we're going to go into the different pathways towards graduation. So we have the three things that we're going to unpack today more in detail regarding the proficiency, composite, and also the additional alternative or assessment or evidence-based pathway. So proficiency, basically, if your student scores proficient or advanced in all three Keystone exams, then they've met the requirement. Composite, which entails the composite score, which I'll go into a little bit more detail as we move on with the presentation, which your Keystone composite score is greater than or equal to 452. So want to make sure that you understand this is a combination of all three exams. Should be greater or equal than 4452 with at least one score, proficient or advanced, and you cannot have any below basic scores. The additional pathway is proficiency on local grade-based requirements plus the CTE, which applies to our TCHS students, alternative assessments, and evidence-based pathways. So I'll explain that a little bit more. But when they say proficiency on local grade-based requirements, what that means is that you just essentially have to pass the course. Scoring proficient or advanced on each Keystone exam, again, Algebra 1, Literature, Biology, that is required toward the pathway. Keep in mind that the minimum scale score per assessment is 1,500. So you have to get a 1,500 or above in order to move forward here. I want to talk a little bit about the non-numeric proficient, which is very confusing to a lot of families. If your student was enrolled in Algebra 1, Literature, or Biology during the 1920 school year, the state by default assigned them a non-numeric proficient. So what that means is that, let's just say, for instance, Algebra 1, your student was enrolled in that in biology in the 1920 school year, they received a proficient by the state, but they did not receive the 1,500 scale score. So later in the presentation, I'll definitely unpack the ramifications behind this because you may or may not be able to use the composite score as a means to fulfill the graduation requirement. Okay, so in regards to the Keystone composite score pathway, I just want to give another look and a more detailed explanation regarding this one in the composite score, which applied to some of our students here in Westchester. So earning a satisfactory composite score on the Algebra 1, Literature, and Biology Keystone exams is pretty much number one, pass the class. That's what that means. So when you test, we want to make sure that not only do you pass the class, but regarding this score, you have to have a proficient score on at least one of the three exams and no less than a basic score on the remaining two exams. The total composite score is pretty much 4452 or greater, where it needs to be a combination of the Algebra 1, the Literature, and the Biology Keystone exam. Now, students who received a non-numeric proficient from the 1920 school year will not earn a numeric score of 1,500. Now, keep in mind here is that this is the year of the onset of the pandemic when schools were closed. The state said that if you're enrolled in an Algebra 1 literature or biology course and you passed that course, they gave you the proficient score, but they did not attach a number to it. So this impacts students who choose to use this pathway in a way that they're forced to pretty much earn proficient on other Keystone exams. So if you took Algebra 1, you were enrolled in Algebra 1 in biology, and let's just say you were assigned the non-numeric proficient in the 1920 school year and you passed it. If you somehow take the literature and you scored a basic score, this takes you out of the running for the composite score pathway because the state wants you to have proficiencies across the board or that composite score of 4452. So unfortunately, if basic scores are earned with the non-numeric proficient, students will not qualify for the Keystone Composite Score pathway. And students will need to retest in order to try to gain that proficiency or choose an alternate or evidence-based pathway assessment. Okay, I have an example here which I want to give you all as far as part of our frequently asked questions on things that come up. Okay, so I have a student here by the name of Jordan. As far as what options are there for Jordan of someone trying to use a composite score, perhaps, or even an alternate pathway. Okay, so here's Jordan's situation. So Jordan achieved a Keystone exam score of the following. So a 1482 in algebra, which is considered basic, a 1460 in biology, which is also basic, and then Jordan received the non-numeric proficient in literature. Okay, so something happened where, okay, this is Jordan's scenario, the non-numeric proficient. So, oh boy, what does Jordan need to do? Okay, so to graduate, Jordan would need to retest for a proficient score of at least a 1510 in literature if he wishes to use the Keystone Composite Score pathway. So by getting the 1510 in literature, that would come out to a total of the 4452, which is the number that the state is requiring for the composite score. Okay, so given this scenario with Jordan, they would need to retest and get at least a 1510 to get to the 4452 threshold. Or Jordan could choose an alternate or evidence-based pathway of assessment for algebra and biology. Okay, so since Jordan received the proficient, even though it is non-numeric, they can choose an alternate or evidence-based pathway for algebra and biology in order to meet this requirement. And I'll get into more details onto what those looks like moving forward. Just another view. And as I said before, this will be on available to parents to take a look at, unpack a little bit more, talk through it with your building assessment coordinators as far as completion of the local grade-based requirements for the alternate assessment. So again, for students who do not score proficient on all the Keystones, somehow the composite score doesn't work out. If you attend TCHS, okay, which is the career in technical assessment, just pass all of the courses, the biology, algebra, and literature. And then as you can see here, there are different pathways in order to meet that graduation requirement. So basically, if you're completing a program or a concentration area, or continuing to have that meaningful engagement with the program over at TCHS, then you're okay to move forward with your graduation requirement. Another one is the alternative assessment criteria, and you actually need one criteria here. So depending on, again, what you need as far as to meet that requirement, as far as what test. So it has, you have to earn a C or better in one of the Keystone courses one of the courses associated with the Keystone exam. So algebra, literature, biology, you definitely have to earn that C, in which the proficient grade was not earned. So you pass all the classes and you have to attain a minimum score on one of the following subject-aligned tests, okay? So they have the PSAT, the SAT, the ACT for students who choose to take that test. The SAT subject test, I want to just clarify that because the SAT, as you know, that 1010, or may not know, it's a combined score. So if you score 630 on either the math or either the English portion of the SAT, that counts, or the ASVAB score, which is a score for students entering the armed forces of a 31, that actually counts towards the requirement, can count. If you're a student who's enrolled in AP courses, you have to earn a score of 3 or higher on an approved AP course with an academic content area associated with each Keystone exam on which the student did not achieve at least a proficient score. So I definitely encourage you. I put a nice link and it's outlined on our district website where you can sort through to see, okay, well, my student's taking an AP course, they got a 3, so what can I put in place of this? Or you can complete a pre-apprenticeship program. And if you just simply Google pre-apprenticeship programs, there's a plethora of information out there. So if you choose to take that route, we'll definitely accept that towards the graduation requirement. And finally, the evidence-based 3 criteria is needed here. And as you can see, the state aligned this where you have to have a minimum of 1 of the following from the first set of categories, and then up to 2 of the following below, okay? And so the state, they try to be flexible on the requirement because we know that, flexibility is key for all students, and we want all kids and, to be able to get to complete this high school graduation requirement. So when you take a look at this, they outline it as far as some possibilities as far as getting that evidence-based pathway. And that includes, which I just talked about, an established score on an alternate assessment. So the PSAT, the SAT, the ACT, et cetera. Note that students take the PSAT twice a year. They take it in 10th grade and they also take it in grade 11. So there's more than one opportunity for your student to, take that pathway if they choose to. Acceptance into an other than 4-year accredited nonprofit institution of higher education. So what that means is that if your student gets into a college, including community college, that can count as one item that we can use as evidence towards your graduation requirement. And of course, which I'll talk about in the next page, a 4-year college is also acceptable. In addition to an industry recognized credential, successful completion of concurrent enrollment, or a post-secondary course. So if you're taking a course that's a dual enrollment, which is a college level course, with your student's high school, that is permissible. And also the service learning project completion, which I'll talk about more, proficient or advanced on a Keystone exam, a letter guaranteeing full-time employment. If your student is, plans to just enter the workforce right after graduation, or have done some things within the job that they currently hold or in the community, those are two separate pathways. So they make it real creative where, if you don't pass the test or get proficient, that's not the end all be all. And they offer more opportunities to be for students to complete this graduation requirement. So as I mentioned before, just want to get another look at students who are in our TCHS program. Again, if you just pass the Keystone exam and pretty much go through the program, get a certificate, or if you're showing progress, it says readiness for continued meaningful engagement in the CTE concentrated program of study, then you're good and you complete the requirement. The alternate pathway, this is one criteria here. What I talked about before, that it starts with everyone passing the Algebra 1, biology, and literature, and then the established scores, which I outlined, and also on a district website on these different assessments, ACT, PSAT, SAT, the ASVAB, or the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery Test. They mentioned a pre-apprenticeship program, also a college acceptance letter into a four-year college that counts. So your building test coordinator can unpack the different details behind this, but again, there are a lot of options here for our students. This is just a continued look as far as the scores that we talked about. I actually have highlighted in red and just crossed out an IB, which we don't have that program here in the Westchester Area School District. However, I put transfer student in question mark because there are some people due to the work circumstances or other things who, may have been in an approved IB course. We will accept that if you are a transfer student in as one of the requirements. Again, another look at this regarding the evidence-based pathway criteria. Successful completion of locally established grade-based requirements for academic content areas associated with each Keystone exam on which the student did not achieve proficiency. Okay, so again, pass the course, but you didn't get proficient. Here are some other options for you. So the score on the alternate assessment, PSAT, SAT, ACT, etc. Acceptance into an other than four-year accredited nonprofit institution of higher education. So this includes community college or trade school that's not for profit. So keep that in mind. Attainment of an industry recognized credential, successful completion of a concurrent enrollment or post-secondary course. That's the dual enrollment that I spoke of. And just to make sure you all can see here, they have it outlined minimally one of the following. So I have three things here. It says two or all three permissible. So again, they're flexible here. But if your student, gets into a school other than a four-year university, it's accredited. In addition to two of the following here, then your student will be okay to move forward. So I want to explain a little bit more in detail the service learning project completion as far as what that looks like. So I gave the example from the SAS website. This is the standard aligned system that the state of Pennsylvania uses. So this example is directly from them. So basically, a service learning project may be developed with a school organization. For instance, you have the National Honor Society, where students actually do different things in order to complete their service hours within this society. It could be a community organization. They gave an example of the Junior Rotarians, anything faith-based that students are doing within the community. I used the Salvation Army, a youth organization, a real popular one, Boys and Girl Scouts. So the service learning project must be monitored, supervised by an adult who can verify project completion and sign off at the conclusion of the project. Keep in mind that the student must provide written verification of completion from the sponsoring organization or the adult supervisor, and a form that the state uses is a minimum of 10 hours. So if you're doing anything within a community, they're really flexible. We have some kids who do things within the school. I'll use our MLK Day of Service as a good example. We have kids who work within the planning, the organization, and then the execution of an MLK Day of Service, which can be considered for the service learning project completion. And you can use 2 of these as an option. If you're one of these people where you maybe have gotten that non-numeric proficient, and I'm going to talk about it later in an example, but you need other things. Again, that service learning project is an option, and a lot of it we do organically within school anyway. Letter guaranteeing full-time employment, an internship or cooperative education program. And then for our student athletes, if you're in compliance with the NCAA's core courses for college-bound student athletes, that also counts as one of the criteria. All right, want to give another example. Just going to move my picture so you all can see. All right, we have Alex. So Alex is a student who wants to look at an alternative pathway towards graduation. So Alex received 1030 on his PSAT, participates in Boy Scouts, and plans to go to a 4-year college. So regarding Alex's testing profile, Alex received that non-numeric proficient for Algebra 1, okay? Ended up getting proficient in biology, got past the 1500 in the 1519, but choosing to exercise the religious opt-out for literature, okay? So just note that parents may exercise a religious opt-out under Act 4. However, with that said, it does default to the alternative or the evidence-based pathway. So in this case, Alex may, in order to graduate, Alex may use his PSAT score towards the literature requirement for the alternate pathway, and Alex will be done. Now, let's just say if Alex wanted to use an alternate pathway, including this 4-year college, that segment of the 4-year pathway, that would be permissible as well. Alex will just bring in their acceptance letter to the school and say, okay, here's my letter, and then we can count that as well, but Alex also made it via the score. Okay, for our final example in regards to the alternate pathway, I want to talk about Kim. And Kim is a student who received an 880 on her PSAT. She plans to work full-time after high school, was accepted into community college, has no IEP or attendance at TCHS. As for Kim's Keystone Exam profile, in the 1920 school year, Kim received the non-numeric proficient on the Algebra 1 and the biology. However, sophomore year, she received a 1440 basic on the literature. So as I did discuss before, unfortunately, Kim won't qualify for the composite score because under those rules, students have to have an actual score on all 3 Keystone exams that total 1440, 4452. That number has to be greater or equal to 1452, in order to meet that requirement. So Kim would need to look at a couple options in order to graduate. So Kim may retest for literature. So if she retests and she gets proficient on that literature, she would have proficiency across the board and she would be good regarding the Keystone requirement. If she chooses not to retest, or for some reason she may retest and might not even receive the proficient score, she may use a letter to confirm full-time employment and the letter that she received from her community college that she was accepted. So there are a plethora of scenarios that could happen to your student, which I would definitely look at everything we provided on the district website. And in addition, we provided your contact information for your building assessment coordinators for further unpacking. I provided the middle and the high school. Starting with the middle school, we do have some students in the district who take Algebra 1 at the middle school level. And so for those students, I would definitely encourage you to test. And if you choose the religious opt-out for that algebra at the middle school level, just note that moving forward, when you get to high school, you do have to choose an alternate or evidence-based pathway, as I discussed. At the high school level, again, I do also encourage students to test as well. But if you choose the alternate pathway, evidence-based pathway, or even the religious opt-out, again, just note that these people are here to help you, to guide you through the whole process. And I know it's a lot of information, but we're definitely here to help you. So at East High School, we have Sarah Graham. At Henderson High School, Dr. Alicia Ozer. We have Dr. Chrissy Eagles at Ruston High School. And at the middle school, we have Dr. Rich Mitchell. At Fugate Pierce, we have Dr. Judy K. Maxwell. And at Stetson, we have Aaron Stevens. And I had provided all their email addresses as well for further unpacking. If you wish to contact me, that's also an option. I'm Dawn Matter. And again, I'm the Equity and Assessment Director here in the district. The letter that went out, my email address is provided on there, and you can find my information on the district website as well. But anything specific to your student, I definitely recommend that you reach out to their building assessment coordinator, okay? Good luck with everything. I wish you all well for this testing season and the end of the school year. And we will see you down the road. Thank you.